Okay, so it's about that time of year where I should make a video describing what I'm going to bring to the Vintage Offroad Nationals this year. This is for the 2022 Vintage Offroad Nationals, and this is my roster. As you can see, it is all Kyosho. In the past, I had done, some RC10s, some Yokomos, some Kyosho stuff, some Tamiya stuff, and when you do that, it makes it, in some ways, more difficult to pack for the race, because then you got to bring parts from all these different manufacturers. Although I am finding out as I'm packing for the race this year that I want to bring like everything, so it actually doesn't make it any easier for me to pack, because I'm just going to pack a whole bunch of Kyosho stuff to bring with me. But anyway, I really like just the theme of running all Kyosho everywhere. I think that'll be a lot of fun. So getting to it, I'm going to run the same classes that I usually run, so that's stadium truck, two-wheel buggy, classic, classic four-wheel buggy, and four-wheel buggy. And as you can see, there are 3 four-wheel drive buggies here, and I'll get to that in a minute. So for stadium truck, I'm going to run my Pro XRT. I ran this back in, 2018? And, it did okay. It felt really good during open practice, really good. But then once the mains came around, the grip level came way up, and I was having trouble with the truck. So I after the events, since then I've been sort of like playing with it and tweaking it and trying to make it better. So I figured I'd really like to bring this and sort of have it redeem itself, because last year when I ran the mid-motor version of this truck, it did really nicely, and I really liked that truck just as much as I like the mid-motor buggy, the Rampage Pro E. But I want to go rear motor this year, so I'm going to bring this. And then for buggy, as you can see, I'm going to run a Pro X. Again, not using the mid-motor Rampage Pro E. I'm going to run the Pro X this year. I did bring this last year to the track just to try it out and see how it felt. But at that time, my suspension setup was way off. I completely, let's say, misestimated what the springs and shocks should be when I was doing the indoor testing with the jumps in the basement. That actually threw me pretty far off base. So I had to go and change that and a few other things. So I think this will be ready to go. And if it's not, I can always change it at the track. But I want to force myself to run rear motor this year and really focus on them. So I'm hopeful that these are going to be quick. For classic, so classic, you can run 2-wheel or 4-wheel chassis, 4-wheel drive chassis, as long as it has a plastic tub chassis. So this is a Laser Alpha. Even though this doesn't have a Laser Alpha body, this is a Laser ZX body, but it's a Laser Alpha chassis. Not stock. It's very heavily modified, but I'm excited to try that out. In the past, as you probably know, I ran a Tamiya Dirt Thrasher a bunch of times, I think like 3 times, and it was just an easy win every time. So I love the Dirt Thrasher. It's a really great chassis, but I want to try something different. And I've been looking for the right Kyosho to try. I thought about maybe a Kyosho Raider, because that's like a mid-motor 2-wheel drive buggy. But then you look at the chassis, and fundamentally it has a bunch of issues in terms of like lacking tunability and being a little bit too basic. I wanted something a bit more advanced, so this is probably as good as you can get as far as a Kyosho classic chassis that is tunable and compatible with higher performance parts from the Laser series. So that should be a lot of fun. Again, for classic, it's a silver can class, so you get a Tamiya Sport Tune motor. These don't go super fast in a straight line, but with the right chassis, you can actually come pretty close to lap times for some of these guys if you drive well. So I think that'll be fun. For classic four-wheel drive buggy, this is the 13.5 motor limit class. I'll be running my Laser ZX-RR. Almost exactly the same setup that I ran a couple of years ago with this chassis. And I think all I did, I made some minor change to the rear suspension. I think I dropped the shocks down 1 hole, and I also added wider wheel hexes. You know, when I raced it in, when was that? Maybe maybe that was 2018. It was really good. It cornered great. A little bit nervous off of jumps, so that's why, like, I made some changes to the shocks to try to improve that, and also making the car wider with the wider wheel hexes. That really helps to calm the car down. So with those wider wheel hexes and with modern laser wheels, this has about the same width as, you know, other four-wheel drive buggies. Otherwise, it's very narrow, and that makes it very nervous. So this, I think, is going to be even better than it was last time, and I love driving these lasers. They're so much fun. And then for four-wheel drive buggy, that's a 10.5 motor limit. I'll be running my ZXS Evolution. This is the one with the 3D printed parts that I made some build videos on recently. And at the time that I built it, I wasn't quite sure if I wanted to run it. But then the more I thought about it, and the more I thought about my other options, like the Yokomos and the Schumacher Cats that I have, the more I realized that this is probably the best choice that I have for this year at least. And there are a few reasons for that. The first one is that this has more tunability than the YZ10. As much as I love the YZ10, I put it right here, this is a 95 YZ10. I may bring this as backup, but I'll get to that in a minute. This has a very good baseline geometry, but the front suspension isn't very tunable. The rear suspension has some tunability, but not a whole lot. And compared to this is very tunable. So you can get lost in tuning, but also it gives you options. So if you're at the track and there's a problem, you have options. The other reason I want to bring this is because, unlike the Schumacher Cats and the Yokomos, this has an adjustable center one-way unit. The YZ10, all my YZ10s that I have is set up as runners. I set up the lay shaft so that, well, actually, not so much the lay shaft, but the front center pulley, I set that up to be locked. It's a special pulley that you can put in there with grub screws and some thread lock, and it just locks it. And it completely changes the behavior of the car. It drives great, but what can end up happening is if you're on a super high grip track, it can make the car push a little bit. Now maybe that's a good thing depending on your driving style, but I've noticed the last couple times I went to Vonats, by the time Sunday rolls around and the track is dried up and the grip level comes way the hell up, you know, it's like a night and day difference between the A-mains on Sunday afternoon and what you experience in open practice on Friday when the track's a bit damper. So, you know, some of these cars might feel amazing during open practice, like for example the Pro XRT. When I brought this last time, it felt really good in open practice. Then when I went to the mains, grip level changed, and I didn't change the truck with it. So this, I think, will be a bit more adaptable across that range because of that adjustable center one way. So if I want to get a bit more rotation, I can just loosen that little nut that's on the side here, and make the front, you know, freewheel just a little bit, not all the way, but just a little bit, just to give me a bit more rotation on corner entry. For the other cars, if you don't have that, like say the YZ10 or the Cats or any other four-wheel drive buggy, usually the way to get more rotation is to increase the rear camber gain. So you shorten the rear camber links, and that makes it rotate a lot, and it's really good. The only problem is you get less forward bite. So coming out of corners, it's a little less stable, it's a bit more squirrely. So I think, you know, keeping a longer rear camber link in the back and having just a slightly adjustable center one way is probably a better tuning compromise, or I should say tuning / driving compromise. So I'm excited to try that. Also, I mean, this car just looks freaking awesome, at least in my opinion. I think it'll be really cool to drive. These wheels, by the way, these are not the wheels I'm going to race with. They're just on here for when I put it on the shelf. So that's the lineup. I'm really excited about this. And then, okay, so there's a few other things to talk about. is, am I bringing backups for any of this? Possibly. There are other chassis I do want to bring to the track. Whether or not they're going to be backups or not, it's hard to say. But these are the top three that come to mind. I'll start over here. The Kyosho Triumph. This is not necessarily something I'm yet ready to race in the two-wheel drive event, but I do want to bring it just to kind of, if there's time during open practice, to do a couple laps and just see how it feels. Try to make some mental notes on whether there's anything I need to or want to change with the setup. Again, I'm not so sure that I'd want to actually enter this into a two-wheel drive event on any year, never mind this year, mostly because the suspension arms are a bit more fragile compared to, you know, an RC10 or Kyosho Pro X, because they're very lightweight and there's not much material. So, you know, sometimes these two-wheel drive events can get pretty hairy in terms of like people crashing into each other, and this is less likely to survive an event like that compared to some of the other cars I have. So if you want to actually finish a race, you know, if you drive clean and you can avoid all the accidents, this is probably fine, but sometimes you can't avoid those things. So I do want to bring this, again, just to play around with it, see how it feels. Hopefully I'll make a video or two of it, you know, going around the track during open practice or something. So if I have room, I'll pack this. For these two cars, so I'm kind of debating right now which one or maybe both to bring as backups for the ZXS Evolution. My initial thought is to bring the YZ10 because it's probably closer in terms of how it drives, and I'd also want to bring it just to like check the setup and make sure it feels right, because I would like to bring this next year, maybe, depending on how the ZXS does and if I want to bring that again. So I might bring this. I might bring the Inferno 10E. I ran that a couple years ago, and you know, at the time it had some reliability issues, but fundamentally it's a very interesting chassis, and I think it can be very fast with a few tweaks, and I spent time making those tweaks. So I'd like to also try this. Again, maybe in open practice, or maybe as a backup if the ZXS dies for some reason, I could just throw this on the track. So this might be more thematically appropriate because it's a Kyosho chassis and I'm running all Kyosho this year. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see what I can fit in the car. But at the very least, I'd like to bring the Triumph and one of these two. Okay? That's kind of it for this video. Next time, you know, and I plan to do like the same thing I usually do at Vonats. Take videos during all the sessions that I can, upload them, you know, and then do like commentary afterwards on how the event went and how each car did. So we'll get to that in due course. The event's in about a month, so just hang tight, and thanks for watching.